He actually passed.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Right.
He actually passed away 2 years after I left the university,
Mm.
but he was really famous and he had like obviously all of these connections to really top wineries. And I say to him that I really wanted to study and understand the influence of oxygen in wine because there are certain factors that affect the life of wine, and one of those is oxygen, either absence or presence of oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very intrigued on how in the process of red winemaking, oxygen, like how it interacts with everything, like the grapes, the juice fermenting, the wine, and the aging, and then in bottle. So he said to me, I think Aubryon is going to be doing that research. But I didn't even know Aubryon at the time. Like I didn't know anything about wine when I went to France. So I didn't know about all of these chateaux. I mean, this is 25 years ago. This is more than 25 years ago. So I went he got me an interview with the winemaker and I went to meet him and I say, oh, I'm here because Monsieur Glory told me that you might be doing this thesis. And I really would like to be part of it. And then the winemaker looked at me and he said, like, well, actually, we are not doing anything with oxygen this year. And I look at him and say, like, okay. And then I put in my chair to say thank you to leave because I don't even have a clue how important Aubryon is. And then he says to me, like, well, but do you want me to tell you a little bit about us? And I mean, you might still be interested doing an internship with us. It's like, no, thank you. I'm not really looking for, like, I was not really like a big fan of Bordeaux. Like I was very into Burgundy and the Rhone. And I had this idea that Bordeaux houses were all of these corporate, big, like very stiff, serious wineries. And so I'm like, oh, no, I'm not interested, but thank you so much. And then we start talking. And I mean, he's one of the most unbelievable winemakers I have worked in my entire life. Like, is beyond smart, experience, gentleman, like everything that you can put in a person to be like just exceptional. So we keep talking and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, I really want to work for this guy. I still didn't even know. I still didn't feel like, oh, I really want to work at Aubryon. So I remember going to my house and my boyfriend was from Cognac, or he is from Cognac, my boyfriend at the time. And I come home and I said, like, oh, I just went to this chateau and I had this interview and I think I screwed up completely, but I really want them to take me. And he said, well, where did you go? And I said, well, I went to Aubryon and La Mission Aubryon. He was like, what?
Yeah.
And then I applied to the position and they took me in. But we did a very different research. So they were really not doing the oxygen. So we did something that is focused on the set of the grapes, which is called Hands and Cheeks in the US, Mitterrandage.
Sure.
So we were studying the phenomenon of Mitterrandage on Merlot grapes, on vines that had virus or very old vines. And we were trying to understand if this virus in France that is called Cornuet affected the set of the grapes, and if that set of the grapes was producing grapes that were less quality than if you have a good set on the berry. So it was a really amazing research. I worked at both chateaus and we experimented at both locations. So we had controls at both locations. We have only Merlot, and we were really focused on these tiny, tiny berries compared to a normal sized berry that had seeds. So it was pretty amazing. Even today, I'm very proud that I ended up working with them, and I learned so much, which is, one of the inspirations of the Les Leçons de Maître is the whites from Bordeaux, obviously. And then the first one that we are going to taste, Le Pierre qui Décide, is a wine that is more inspired on the Loire Valley.
Okay.
We are really like trying to do 100% Sauvignon Blanc. We fermented the wine only on puncheons, and we have been using the same vineyard since 2012.
Wow, the nose is great. I am a big Sauvignon Blanc fan, and I'm very excited about Sauvignon Blanc in California these days because it just seems like we've really turned a corner. I mean, styles used to be all over the place, right? And Napa had all these oaky Sauvignon Blancs, and then New Zealand came in and started kind of kicking our ass. And I think a lot of people took notes about what was working, you know. And now it's really nice to see these really refreshing, minimally oaked Sauvignon Blancs that really show the variety better than they used to.
Yeah. Yeah, and like we have really low pH on these wines. So both of the wines are always around 3 pH, 3.0, 3.1. They are on the lower alcohol profiles. They go between 12.5 and 13.5. A ton of acid, so really like very, very high acid wines. I'm really focused on, they're very, very food friendly. And I feel like that's maybe one of the reasons why we make a very small production, but Asia continued to grow a lot for us, continue to be a very important market. And I feel like the quality of the wine and just this focus on the purity of the varietal and the dryness of the wine and the acidity just make them to be perfect with food, and definitely very stable and very age worth it.
Yeah, it's really nice and racy, and complex. You can never really replicate the minerality of some parts of France, but
Yeah.
you can at least make a nice crisp white wine, you know. Tell me a little bit about where this comes from in Russian
So
River
this is a
Valley.
vineyard that is in the Santa Rosa area, really close to Occidental Road. A very cool climate, more clay content. So it's gold-rich soils, but they have a little bit more of clay compared to many other vineyards.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, it takes a long time to start bud break, so they tend to be worried about frost control. And we harvest normally at the end of August. So we only get 3 tons every year, and unfortunately this year we only got 1.5 tons.
Wow.
Not
Yeah, I
much.
noticed these are all pretty small production wines. It looks like you only make
Yeah.
it, 100 cases or 100 plus.
Yep.
Where do you sell them, like mostly direct from like to mailing list, or I'm sure they're in some restaurants.
Yeah, so
But
we have a pretty good distribution in California. We do mailing list direct, but we started really with distribution at the beginning because nobody knew the brand, nobody knew the project. And we actually export to about 5, 6 different countries. So we
Oh
do
wow, okay.
tiny allocations to different places. Yep.
What other countries are you selling in? It's like the
So
UK?
so we do Japan and Korea are two of the most
Okay. Oh, and you
important.
said China. Yeah.
Not China.
Oh,
No, we
okay.
don't do China.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Just Asia.
Asia. I say
Okay.
Asia,
Yes.
but yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
But Japan and South Korea, and
Hmm.
then we do Switzerland, um, a little bit on the UK, Netherlands, Italy, and I'm forgetting maybe 1 or 2.
It's
Yeah.
it's interesting when I talk to friends on the East Coast. I feel like there's a lot of these small production wines from California that never even make it to New York. Like people seem to, they're really off people's radar. Some of the best, small production California wines,
Yeah.
there's just not enough to go around, I guess. So
Yeah, I also think New York is very European
Mhm.
focus on the habits of drinking. So I think it's really hard for people to
Without a
have
doubt.
access to them on premise and off premises, because I just think historically, they are so close to Europe,
Yeah,
um,
that's
that you that you see more of an Italian and French inspired palate, and
mhm.
Spain. Than, I mean, obviously they drink tons of domestic wines, but it would be like the bigger brands and people that
Yeah.
just spend more money on promoting those wines.
Does seem like there's more good smaller brands that are making it into the UK these days. I mean, unfortunately, the wines get very expensive by the time they get there, but But
Yeah.
the wines are world class, so it's the Brits always seem to want to kind of keep an eye on the rest of the world at least.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we said, a really good amount of Alma wines and Cattleya in the UK.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Um, yeah, why don't we move on to a red? Let's see. So I've got the Goddess, I've got the Initiation, I've got the Belly of the Whale. Probably do the Pinots first, I guess.
Sure. I would
Um,
say I would recommend to start with the belly of the whale if you have it
okay.
open.
Yeah, I do.
So the three reds that you got are like really like an expression of my high-end wines and really kind of my focus on different sites and the terroir and how we, in a very respectful manner, are treating the grapes to showcase the site. So the belly of the whale is a wine that I had to change vineyard sourcing in 2018. So I was a little bit devastated to lose my old vines that I used to make from a vineyard in Carneros. And I was like, oh my gosh, how I'm going to find a replacement for this? You always think that it's just going to be so hard. And then I found this new vineyard called Sanchez, where I started to source grapes in 2018. And I just love, I get this little tiny vineyard that is like on top of the hills at about 1,300 feet elevation. They're just so beautiful, tiny berries. We never get more than 1.7, 2 tons per acre. And yeah, it's just beautiful. So I source from that block and we have expanded to other blocks. But for the belly of the whale, we only choose the best part of those blocks and do a very small blend. So we only bottle about 125 cases every year. 2022, what I love about the vintage, it just has these tannins that are so approachable. Like the wines have really beautiful acidity and they are very aromatic, but the tannins are so smooth, so easy to drink, especially compared to 2021, which I think the wines are pretty tight and they need a lot of time. I think 2022s are just a pleasure to drink right now.
It is really supple. But I think I was reading these are Dijon clones, right? Is it 777 and
Yes, correct.
115 or whatever?
667 and 777.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think some of those really elevated sites like along the coast are like not only are they stunning, but they make spectacular wine.
Yes.
I mean, between in the Fort Ross area, Mendocino Ridge, they're just so visually incredible that it's hard to imagine that they wouldn't make like insanely good wine.
I know. There is this proximity to the ocean and the fog, and then the cold nights and how it preserves the acidity. I mean, all of those things are just fantastic.
So what town is this near? Just so I can kind of get my bearings. Petaluma,
so it's
okay.
South. So Sanchez is
so it's
on
not
the
that far
southern part, but it's high elevation. So very different than many of the Petaluma vineyards that are lower elevation.
Yeah,
I think
the gap.
they have they have two very different profiles. So
yeah,
I would say for me, this has a little bit more of, I don't know, minerality and acidity, and they tend to be a little bit more tense. And I just really think the elevation is what is making the difference, which is one of the aspects of the Fort Ross Seaview AVA, is that all of these vineyards are above 900 feet elevation.
Yeah, it's got nice acid, but it's not like super nervy. It's got a nice suppleness to it. But you said the 21s were a little tighter. Okay.
Yeah, and I love 21s. I mean, I think 21s are gonna age for so long. I just think that the 2022s came behind the 2021s, and I'm drinking more 2022 now than what I would be opening 2021s. And sometimes I don't do that, right? I'll be like, oh, it's such a baby. I'm not going to drink this wine for like 6 more months, which is not the case with these wines. I mean, I'm opening the bottles and we are like, they're just so easy to drink. I think they just have this kind of, I don't know, easiness to them. And yeah, supple, like you say, that's probably a very good descriptor, I would say, of the vintage in general.
Yeah.
So Tim, tell me a little bit about you. Where are you from? What took you to wine?
Well, so I was born in Kansas. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. And my parents were a little bit interested in wine, more just like everyday stuff. You know, they'd have some, Mouton Cadet on the dinner table a lot, or like this Sicilian wine called Corvo, or like, Bola, Valpolicella. And but then some people from New York moved in next door to us, and they sort of started to educate my parents a little more about, art and wine and stuff. And I didn't really drink much wine probably in college, but I got a job working in a wine shop when I was 21. And I just read every book in the place. And then I was getting to try a lot of wine, and I became the buyer. And then a friend talked me into writing for a little alt weekly newspaper. And so I did that while I was in law school, like every week. I'd write a story for like, $15 or $25 a
Oh
week.
my God.
I did that for 3 years. And then, so this is in the 90s. And at the time, newspapers were starting to hire wine writers because wine was, just increasing in popularity so quickly. It was a very different time, but the wine scene was just getting really, really big, really fast. And so I got a job at the Minneapolis Star Tribune, just as a freelance columnist. It wasn't like, I mean, calling it a job is a little bit generous considering what the compensation was. But then you start to get to travel, and go on press trips and stuff. And I moved to California. So I was just getting tired of living in Minneapolis, and um, started writing for other publications in the San Francisco Chronicle and trade magazines and Decanter, and wherever I could land a gig or pitch a story. But I mean, it was a great ride. I mean, I think wine writing is kind of on the decline right now, just to the way as the wine business is struggling a little bit. But it's been a great ride. I've been able to meet a lot of really cool people and travel all over the world, and be educated by really, really smart people. So yeah, it's been a good ride.
Nice.
Um, and then I also, I'm a lawyer, so I have a small entertainment law practice, and I work with a lot of bands, which is kind of my other passion.
Wow.
And some filmmakers and other just small businesses, whatever they need done. Um, so yeah, that's kind
Cool.
of I divide my time between the two.
Awesome.
And now I just write for Hugh Johnson's Pocket Wine Book, which is a good gig. So that's kind of the most sold wine book in the world, every year, which is great. And it's been going for 40 years or so. And
What
then
for you? Not for you writing for them, but you have been writing for them.
no, I've just been with them about 5 or 6 years. But yeah, it's been published for like 45 years or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think the Alma Pinot is there, and we have people coming here because they read the book or they use the book to go visit wineries.
oh,
So,
cool. Cool.
yeah.
Well, you're in it.
Yeah, I was like, wow, that is so cool. They
And Jeff's
really
in it
like,
too now.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, pretty cool.
So how did you meet Jeff? Did you meet in like an educational environment? Is that what I read?
No, so we met making wine. So when I worked in 2005 here in California, I worked as harvest assistant winemaker to Vanessa Pay at Pay Vineyards. And uh, the Pisoni family
Rave
was
Winery.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then the Pisani family was renting space. So half of the winery, Jeff was making their wines, the Pisoni wines, and the other half of the winery was Pay Winery. So, but it was their
Oh,
building,
okay.
it was their new building in Cloverdale, and we just became really good friends. And I was doing harvesting in South Africa, and we would meet in South Africa. So we would, yeah, we would meet there, we would meet here, and after 3 years, we had a dinner, we got very drunk, and we started dating. So that's really like the real story. But yeah, we have been together since 2007. Yeah.
Okay. All right, great.
Yeah.
Let's try the goddess,
Okay.
maybe.
So the Goddess is a really special vineyard. It's a vineyard that is owned by Paul Hobbs, and
Okay.
it's called the Gold Rock Vineyard. So it is in Annapolis.
Mm.
And so it's a West Sonoma Coast appellation, pristine, fruit is fantastic. I love everything about that site. It's my most expensive Pinot Noir fruit, so that's why the price of the wine is just so different. It
That's really
just
exotic.
yeah, it just
Really
so like
brambly and sauvage, kind of like um you can really place this on the coast for sure. Just it's got all that spice. Um,
and then it's so long. Like
mm,
you have the first sip, and then it keeps expanding on volume and back, and then it just kind of goes a little bit on your head, and it's just so stimulating, and there's so many aromatics. It's like very floral, like rose petals and violets, and then it goes to the red fruit, and you have raspberry, like pure
wow.
raspberry. um yeah, and then you have the oak. So I use 5 years air dry oak, and it's 85% new oak. So I love new oak on wines because is again my obsession with oxygen. So when you age the wine on new oak, you are already allowing for a micro oxygenation, oxygen that is going through the oak, that is going to stabilize the color of the wine, which gives the wines a much better life on the long time aging. So I use very light toast barrels, but I'm not afraid of new oak. I kind of like it. So I just think you have to use the right oak.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right about that. Wow. Well, this is wild. This is really a distinctive one. Wow, that's magnificent. And what clones are in this one?
So this is a 115 and 667. So two
Okay,
Dijon clones as well. Mhm.
okay. Yeah, that's wonderful. Wow. So we know you're a Syrah fan.
I
Uh,
am.
and Syrah's been kind of a complicated story in California.
I know.
I can remember I had one of the really exciting wines that I had before I left Minnesota was my friend Russell Bevan, who's a winemaker now.
Of
Um,
course.
and he's probably a fan of yours because he has very good taste in wine. And he had, I think it was probably a 1997 Sean Thackeray Orion um, that he let me take home like part of the bottle after we had dinner. I think, and it really kind of blew my mind. So I think it just had such a great, like, real Syrah character. And then, but in recent years, like, I mean, it seems like Syrah has really struggled in California, and I don't know if it's because people aren't really planting in ideal places, or because they're not sure what they're after, or they're trying to make, you know, big ultra ripe California wines, or some combination of all of the above. But I'm excited to try this, and I know I've had some terrific Syrah from Santa Lucia Highlands. My partner, Elise, she used to work at Morgan.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I always thought they made pretty good Syrah. So now we're tasting the Initiation
Yes.
Syrah
So
2022.
So that is a vineyard that was planted in 2007 by the Pisonis and the Franchonis together in partnership. They used 3 Selection Massal from John Alban. So the clone that I have on mine is a clone that he brought from Côte-Rôtie. It's very large clusters with tiny berries, so lots of concentration of the berries. As you know, the Santa Lucia Highlands is that zone 1. It's a very cool climate, so same as Sonoma Coast. So it really takes a long time to get this fruit ripe. Last year I harvested on November 5th. It was
Wow.
crazy. Yes. Well, everybody knows last year was really late, but November 5th is late for Syrah. I love this site. I really love what my brother-in-law does. I think he's a very, very talented vineyard manager. And I normally keep the fruit for a very long time in tank. So we do extended maceration on the wine, and I do whole cluster depending on the vintage. So I don't remember. You probably have the technical sheets. Every
I
year I
do.
change it, so I always forget. I
Uh-huh.
can do 0%, and sometimes I do 50%. But I don't know if this wine has any.
Well, it's very, very good. It's um has tons of Syrah character, which is essential, really, like, because it's such a unique grape, and one of my favorites too. When it's done right, I think it seems like one of the tricky things is that to have great Syrah character, it needs to be grown in a some kind of cool site. Um, but then that tricky, it's like if it hangs too long, sometimes it just goes over a cliff.
Yep.
And like
Yep.
when I've seen people growing it in Bennett Valley, another very cool
Yeah.
area, it can be wonderful. But in some years, if it's a cold year and it doesn't get right, it hangs so long that it just all of a sudden it just tastes like raisins. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, and I also think like people just need to treat. I treat it like a great Cabernet Sauvignon. So I think if you treat it from that perspective, and you're trying to just make a beautiful red wine for the table for a great meal, then you are giving the respect to the varietals. But it really needs farming. It needs to be farmed like Pinot Noir as well. Like you cannot be trying to do 4.5 tons an acre. You know, I think that with Syrah, you need to be doing 2.5, 3 tons an acre. So really
mhm,
like not trying to push crop, because then it becomes very herbaceous and very green. And like you
mhm.
say, if you wait and leave it hanging, it just falls off the cliff.
Yeah, it's kind of
So
funny.
I
I
agree
mean,
with that.
in California, everybody likes to talk about hang time. And they used to do it a little bit more, I think, than these days. I think now people try to pick things at a reasonable point. But it was funny when I was in Burgundy for the first time. It was like in the spring, like in Macon, it would be like, oh, okay, it's flowering today, so we'll pick in 100 days. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Ugh, you guys think about this completely differently, but it's kind of dawned on me over the decades that grapes seems to have kind of a gestation period. And if you go too far, out of that gestation period, you're not going to get something that's like really dialed in and
Yeah.
like what it should be. It's going to be weird and not as good. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I really think like farming, the way the vineyards get planted, the selection of clones that you use, like there was a time on the 90s where a lot of people were going for high crop of Syrah, even on the Rhone Valley, and they pull off all of those vineyards. So a lot of the Dijon clones and university selections were all based on productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the biggest change that I think is happening in California is a lot of the small producers like John Alban, the Pisonis, what I planted at the Pisoni vineyard for the reward, which is only out of magnums. I only made 25 cases, so that's why we don't submit that much of that wine, because I only have like 120 bottles. But it's a selection massage from France as well. And I think it's just growers really looking for quality. And the selection massage, the clones before were all based on productivity. And those clones are not going to give you
Mm-hmm.
age ability on the wine. They are going to give you a lot of crop that you can hang on the vines, but it's not going to develop the grapes to produce the right phenolic ripeness and the right aromatics and the right concentration for the wine to really make it a standalone great red wine on a 5 stars Michelin steakhouse,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I really feel like it needs to be treated with the same standards and farming as we do with Pinot, but also the wine needs to be made a little bit more like a Cabernet, a high-end Cabernet Sauvignon, to make a difference.
Sure. So do you think this vineyard will stay there for a while?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Good, good. Yeah. Yeah, Syrah's just had a kind of a troubled story in California. But I'm glad some people are sticking with it because it just makes such an interesting wine. It always
Yeah.
seems to me that it's like it's kind of half fruit and it's half like all these other things,
Yeah,
unlike a
no,
lot of wines.
yeah. They're very committed to it. They only have like 3 acres, but they are very committed to
Okay.
it.
Yeah. Great. So what are you looking at doing in the future? Let's talk about that. Like, what do you what else is on your list of things you want to do?
Yeah, I really think like having a vineyard for Cattleya wines is definitely something that has been on my radar. I was trained as a viticulturist before I was trained as a winemaker. So I got to do that with Wayfarer to be like the vineyard manager and the winemaker for 6 years. And I certainly miss that a lot, like to have a place where I go and I'm crafting and taking care of these vines to produce really unbelievable fruit. So I feel like that's definitely the next step. Obviously, it's very expensive to do anything in California. So, but yeah, I think that's in our future. We also roast coffee, so we want to
Mm,
continue growing our coffee business, and we treat coffee a little bit like wine, and actually they are very similar because it's very terroir driven. It's a byproduct of a fermentation, and quality on coffee is measured based on acidity. So. Very important to us. We only do Colombian coffee because I'm from Colombia, obviously. But yeah, so I think that to continue to grow the brands and to continue to find vineyard sites and hopefully to have our own vineyard, that would be amazing.
sure. Yeah. Um, well, let's talk briefly about the shared notes kind of project that you do with your husband, Jeff.
Yeah.
Obviously, who is also a winemaker at the Zoni family. But um, what's it like collaborating on stuff? Do you guys work together well? I'm sure you probably do. But are there do you have differences in taste in some regards?
Well, I think that we have a very similar vision on wines and the wines we love to drink and the wines we respect. And when we were coming to this project together, we obviously wanted to make something different because we both were, I mean, obviously the Pisoni family is very known for Pinot Noir. and I was already making a name for myself as a Pinot Noir winemaker. So we didn't want to do another Pinot Noir because, you know, what's the interest on that? Like just to compare like what I do versus what he does versus what we do together. But we love Sauvignon Blanc, and we found ourselves never drinking Californian Sauvignon Blanc. We would drink a lot of French Sauvignon Blancs. I love Pessac-Léognan. I obviously work at Aubryon. Jeff actually did an internship at Peter Michael, so he was a big fan. He's a big fan of the Sauvignon Blanc. So we kind of wanted to do something different. So different that everybody was like, what are you two doing making Sauvignon Blanc? You guys have never made Sauvignon Blanc in California, which is not true because Jeff interned at Peter Michael and I did Sauvignon Blanc in France, not here, but did Sauvignon Blanc. So it was fun. It was just something different. We had very similar opinions on how we wanted to make these wines. I think the only big difference from a winemaking point of view was the decision of filtering or not filtering the wine. So we decided to not filter the wine, even though we are not going through malolactic fermentation. And in France, in or Sauvignon Blanc producing regions, we always filter the wine. So for me, it was like, oh, we are going to filter. But I don't filter Cattleya, Chard, or Pinot, or Syrah. So Jeff was like, well, we don't filter our wines. Why do you want to filter the Chardonnay? He said, like, well, because it's not going through ML, and that's what we do in France. So we send it to ETS, we run DNA testing. We didn't detect any bacteria and very, very little yeast. So we bottle it and fine and unfiltered. So yeah, these wines taste very similar as to what they taste in barrel. It's amazing. Yeah.
It's delicious. Well, I think, yeah, like I said, I love Sauvignon Blanc, and it's kind of funny because it was just stylistically all over the place in the US, and I think that was why it wasn't really attracting people. Plus, there was this notion that like herbaceousness in wine is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like that's like has a very negative connotation. But it's just part of the essential nature of Sauvignon Blanc, and you just like if you try to erase that, you've lost it. You're just not making Sauvignon Blanc anymore. But this has just that great kind of gooseberry, grass, grapefruit profile.
Yeah, and I think like once you open the Raison de Maître, which is the Sauvignon Blanc Semillon blend, you get a little bit more of this peach, stony character. And as the wines age, Semillon tends to take over more on the blend, which is very interesting. So I love both for very different reasons. Like I'm a big oysters fan. I can eat like 3 dozens by myself, like no problem. It's just they are too expensive. But other than that, I could eat many. And I feel like Chardonnay is like I did a lot of dinners in Japan and Korea this year when I went in February. Everything like kimchi, from kimchi to pork dishes to soup noodles to sashimi, all of that for the Pierre de Cid is just amazing. And then you have the Chardonnays, which is so complex. It's more like your elaborated dishes, like Michelin restaurants that have so many different things together that this wine can just like cut through it and build on the mouth in the middle of the palate. So both wines are just so different, like absolutely different. And they age very different as well. So yeah, so I love that we can create 2 wines that have so much personality and that are so dynamic under the same label. Very cool.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to try the blend sometime too, but this is great. Well, I mean, I think that probably kind of covers it. Thanks a lot for walking me through all these beautiful wines. And again, it's like really nice to meet you finally. Because I really admire your work and
thank you.
And everything you do. And I love the Alma de Cattleya wines too, which are incredible values and really good, straightforward wines at a fair price, like between 25 and 30, basically, right? Okay.
That's the idea. Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Bibiana, and
But
enjoy
thank
the
you.
rest of your day. And I
You
hope we
too.
get to talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Bye now.
Nice to finally meet you.
Yes. Take care.
Bye, team. Take care.